Hi everybody, this is the top 10 video for Judith Jarvis Thomson's piece, A Defense of Abortion. The number 8 thing that you need to know about this argument is, what is Jarvis Thomson's position? In this essay, Judith Jarvis Thomson argues that even if we accept that a fetus is a person, this does not mean that all abortions are morally wrong. Number 7. What is the premise upon which most anti-abortion arguments are built? Most anti-abortion arguments are based on the premise that the fetus is a person. The reasoning behind this is that because development is continuous, there's no point at which we can say one is a person and one is not a person. We can't put our finger on the exact moment when that happens, so we should just consider fetuses at the moment of conception to be a person. As the chapter overview discussed, though, this is a conceptual slippery slope. It's just like saying that an acorn is an oak tree, that they're the same thing. Saying that a single cell or a group of cells, a blastocyst, a fetus is a person is not the same as saying that a person is a person. It's a fallacious line of reasoning. Whether or not the claim that abortion is always wrong is a good or bad claim, a right or wrong claim, is beside the point. This line of reasoning in particular is problematic. It's fallacious. So Thomson says, okay, the line of reasoning that is given from most anti-abortion positions is problematic. But let's see if there is a good line of reasoning. Let's really investigate this argument without arguing about whether or not the fetus is a person. So Judith Jarvis Thomson says, let's just allow that premise for the sake of argument. We'll just say, okay, even though we don't have a very good argument with evidence for the claim that a fetus is a person, let's just allow it and see where we can go from there, even if we say that a fetus is a person from the time of conception. For the sake of argument, how does this allow us to get to the claim that abortion is morally impermissible? So ultimately, she's saying, let's not get hung up on arguing against the claim that a fetus is a person, or arguing for the claim that a fetus is a person. Even though this is really important to the abortion debate, Jarvis Thomson says, let's get beyond this. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that a fetus is a person. Now where do we go? Now how do we make the argument? So again, Thomson is not supporting the claim that a fetus is a person from the time of conception, but she is saying, let's just allow it. Let's just allow this premise to stand. If we allow this premise to stand, the argument then looks like this. Every person has a right to life, therefore the fetus has a right to life. A woman has rights over her body. A person's right to life overrides a woman's rights over her body, therefore abortion is morally impermissible. This is what the argument becomes if we allow the claim that a fetus is a person and every person has a right to life. The argument, of course, now really hinges on premise 4. Whether or not a person's right to life overrides a woman's rights over her body. Number 6. What is the unconscious violinist, and how does this help to explain the abortion debate? So Judith Jarvis Thomson gives us this thought experiment, which is common among philosophers, where imagine you're kidnapped in the middle of the night, you wake up and you're in this room hooked up to all these machines, and you see that you're also hooked up to some other person lying there. This person is a famous violinist, and they are completely unconscious. The unconscious violinist has a fatal kidney disease, and lucky you, your blood happens to be a match. So only you can save the life of the famous violinist. To unplug yourself from the famous violinist would be to kill him, violating his right to life, based on the premise that a person's right to life overrides your right to choose what happens to your body. Well, you might object to this thought experiment and say, that's not really a good analogy because you didn't choose this. You didn't choose to be kidnapped in the middle of the night. But a woman does choose pregnancy. However, the response to this objection would be that a person brought into existence through rape has no less of a right to life than a person brought into existence not through rape. So it doesn't follow from this objection that whether or not one chooses pregnancy helps us to decide whether someone's right to life overrides our right to make decisions about our own body. So we can't make exceptions based on rape with this type of argument. There has to be another kind of argument for exceptions. This one just doesn't stand. So, number 5. So the issue that the unconscious violinist argument illustrates is that we have to address how we adjudicate between the rights of more than one person. So how does Thomson answer this? Here we have a conflict I hope that you can recognize between the duties that we have to other people and the rights that we have in terms of freely choosing what to do with our own lives and bodies. So what if a mother develops a life-threatening risk during her pregnancy? The conservative argument, the anti-abortion or extreme view, as Thomson calls it, would look a little something like this. Directly killing an innocent person is murder, and murder is always wrong, and performing an abortion is killing an innocent person. Therefore, abortion is murder. Whereas doing nothing is merely letting a person die, in this case the woman who is pregnant, and one's duty to refrain from murder is more stringent, morally, than one's duty to keep a person from dying. Therefore, abortion is always wrong. So, on this argument, it's wrong to have an abortion even if the mother's life is in danger. Again, this is the extreme view. Yet, let's look at premise 2. Is premise 2 in fact true? Murder is always impermissible? Is it always morally wrong to kill another person? Now think carefully about this. Is it always wrong for soldiers to kill other people? Is it always wrong to kill someone in self-defense? Is it wrong to kill someone who enters your home, threatening to cause you harm, possibly even take your life? Is premise 2 really true? Thomson, and most people, would agree that killing is not always wrong. That taking another person's life to save your own is not morally problematic. And if that's the case, then it cannot be said that a woman performing an abortion on herself to save her own life is an instance of murder and therefore wrong. So with the example of life-threatening risks and adjudicating between persons' rights, if we think back to the unconscious violinist example, here we have this situation where you're going to die if you remain plugged into the unconscious violinist, yet you're not morally permitted to unplug yourself. That's really sad, that's rough, but you'd be murdering the violinist if you unplugged, because only you can keep the unconscious violinist alive. The problem here is that this is a firm rejection of the personhood and rights of the pregnant woman in order to affirm the personhood and rights of the fetus. So here's an interesting claim. A person, including a woman, can defend her life against threats posed to it. Thus, the extreme view that abortion is morally impermissible, always, is false. Thomson says, let's narrow the issue down a little bit. What if we're not only talking about cases where the mother's life is at risk? Then is it ever morally permissible, even if we agree that a fetus is a person? So we're still dealing with how we adjudicate between persons' rights. How do we deal with the fact that if a fetus is a person, it has a right to life, yet a woman is a person, and a woman has a right to defend her own body? So how do we adjudicate when these rights are at odds. We have to ask, what does it mean to have a right to life? The number 4 thing you should know is, what is a right to life? So let me throw another thought experiment at you. Imagine that I come down with some strange disease and it's terminal, and the only thing that will keep me alive is if Oprah Winfrey drops what she's doing right now, flies immediately to East Lansing, comes to my bedside, and reads to me for 4 hours straight. Really, imagine that this is the only thing that can keep me alive. Is Oprah Winfrey morally required to drop what she's doing, whatever that may be, to fly to East Lansing, Michigan, and read to me for 4 hours in order to save my life? Do I have a right to Oprah doing that? Is it my right that Oprah drop what she's doing and come and do that for me? Does my right to life override Oprah's rights to choose what she does with her life right now and for the next day or two? No, it would be really nice of her, what we call morally supererogatory, going above and beyond. But she has no moral obligation to drop what she's doing to help me, even if I do have a right to life. So let's review where we're at in terms of the argument. And remember, we've granted, for the sake of argument, that a fetus is a person. Every person has a right to life, so the fetus has a right to life, because the fetus is a person. A woman has rights over her body, gasp, the right to choose and make choices like any other person. And a person's right to life overrides a woman's rights over her body, therefore abortion is morally impermissible. So we're really honing in on premise 4 here. Do other people's rights to life override our rights as people to our own bodies? And the second argument, directly killing an innocent person is murder. Murder is always wrong. And performing an abortion is killing an innocent person. Therefore, abortion is murder. Whereas doing nothing is letting a person die. And one's duty to refrain from murder is more stringent than one's duty to keep a person from dying. Therefore, abortion is impermissible. Remember, the question here was whether or not premise 2 was true. Whether or not killing someone is always morally wrong. The unconscious violinist example was meant to show that although it would be really nice to save someone's life, it's your choice whether or not you want to lie there next to the unconscious violinist for the next 9 months while he uses your body to get better. It's not clear that that's morally required of you. And we said, if a woman's life is not at stake, we still have a conflict between the rights of persons. So we have to understand, what is a right to life? What does that entail? If I have a right to life, what does that guarantee me as a person? According to Thomson, having a right to life does not guarantee a right to use another person's body, even if that use is needed for life itself. Here's another thought experiment that Thomson gives. She gives a scenario where, in one case, a parent buys their children a box of chocolates, and one of the brothers goes ahead and eats all of the chocolates. Has he done something wrong? Yes, because both brothers had a right to the box of chocolates. It was given to both of them. In another case, imagine it's one of the brothers' birthdays, and so one brother is given a box of chocolates, and he eats all the chocolates. Has he done something wrong? No, this is not unjust, because the right to eat the chocolates was only given to one of the brothers. So the right to life consists not in the right to not be killed, but the right to not be killed unjustly. Thomson is making a distinction here between an action that is done and an action that is done unjustly. With the case of the chocolates, it's sure sad that the older brother didn't share in both cases, but it's only unjust in the case where both brothers had a right to some of the chocolates. So with the case of the unconscious violinist, the violinist does have a right to life, But you don't unjustly kill the violinist by unplugging yourself, because the violinist has no rights to use your body. So having a right to life does not equate to having a right to use another person's body to sustain that life. Number 3, how do we distinguish between just and unjust killing? Even if the fetus is a person, and even if that person has a right to life, it does not follow that abortion is unjust killing. That remains to be seen. We need to understand the distinction between just killing and unjust killing in order to make the claim that abortion is unjust and therefore morally impermissible. So it's not the right to life that the unjustness of abortion depends upon. It's the justness or unjustness of the killing. And this depends upon whether or not a person has a right to use another person's body. So you might object to this and say, well, but this would allow for abortion in cases of rape, but in all other cases of pregnancy, the fetus would be a result of a voluntary act. Meaning that the fetus as a person has been granted a right to use another person's body in the same way that giving chocolates to both children was granting both of them a right to the chocolates. But now we have to ask, well, wait a minute. So if a woman chooses to have sex, is she granting a fetus the right to use her body? This is contentious, so we want to take a look at this more closely. Here's a thought experiment that Thomson gives. Imagine that you're in a room and it's really hot, and you open the window and go about your business. In the meantime, a burglar climbs in. You haven't granted the burglar the right to enter and make use of your home. You've simply opened a window to get cooler, right? It's hot and steamy. So to alleviate that tension, you open the window, never planning to be robbed in the process, but you find out later that you have been robbed. Have you granted the burglar a right to use your home? According to Thomson, it's absurd to say that opening the window grants the burglar a right to use your home. There's a difference between choosing to have sex and granting a fetus the right to use your body. It may be true that there are some cases where abortion is unjust killing, where the fetus has been granted the right to use the woman's body. But the fetus must have a right to use the woman's body. This must be a right that is granted by the woman. Now, this is complicated. We would have to hash out the particulars of when this is the case and when it isn't. But the point here is that the fetus must have a right granted by the woman to use her body. It must be the woman's choice to remain pregnant. So to make this distinction a little more clear, even if person A should do something for person B, even if Oprah should come and read to me to save my life, this doesn't mean that I have a right against Oprah, that Oprah has to do it for me. And moreover, this cannot turn on how easy it is for that thing to be provided. For example, if Oprah just lived down the block, then she's morally obligated. If the unconscious violinist only needed to use your kidneys for an hour, then you are morally obligated. What about 3 hours? What about 5? What about 9 months? We might say that someone is unkind if they don't help. We might say that they're greedy, that they're selfish, but it's still not clear that one person has rights over another person if those rights are not granted to them. Nobody is required to make sacrifices of their own health, their own interests, their own time in order to keep another person alive. Number 2, are pregnant women morally required to be good Samaritans? Thomson discusses the distinction between the Good Samaritan and the minimally decent Samaritan, and how these stories relate to our moral obligations and duties. Ultimately, she's going to say that nobody is morally obligated to make big sacrifices of their own health and time and interests, but we are morally obligated to make minimal sacrifices. If I see someone drowning over there in the pond, for example, it would be wrong for me not to help them. but I'm not morally obligated to lie next to the unconscious violinist for 9 months to keep him alive. Maybe you've heard of the Kitty Genovese case, where many people saw this ongoing attack and an eventual murder that happened, and nobody reported it, what we now understand as the bystander effect. And in this case, not only were there no good Samaritans who maybe put their own lives at stake and went out and tried to interrupt the assault and eventual murder, but there were not even any minimally decent Samaritans who, from the comfort of their own home, lifted their fingers to call the police and have the police come and intervene. But the question here is, do we require women to be not only minimally decent Samaritans like every other person, but do we require pregnant women to be good Samaritans, to go above and beyond, to give up their own interests, their own choices, their own time, their own energy, and their own health? If you've never seen the things that happen to women's bodies when they're pregnant, don't underestimate what a woman gives up going through 8 or 9 months of pregnancy. So what is required morally? Ultimately, this is what Thomson thinks the argument comes down to. Anyone who takes the conservative or extreme view on abortion is requiring that a pregnant woman be a good Samaritan, that she go above and beyond, that she do what is supererogatory, that we do not expect of other people, that we don't expect them to give up their own rights, that a fetus's rights should override their own rights to their own bodies and health and interests. So lastly, the number one thing you should know is, even if we grant that a fetus is a person, which Thomson is not arguing that we should, but even if we do grant that for the sake of argument, is abortion always morally wrong? It should be thoroughly clear to you that Thomson is arguing that even if we grant that a fetus is a person, it does not follow, the argument cannot be made that abortion is morally impermissible. And that's it. We'll hear more on the abortion debate next time with Marianne Warren's piece on the moral and legal status of abortion.